Well, Joan, welcome to Aggie Allstars. As we talked, I guess about a month ago now, you had reached out and kind of said, I think it was maybe my dad's one, Len Hawkins. So first, you are our first non-Len on Aggie Allstars.
Wow.
So that's so you're our third guest and our first non-Len. But Aggie Allstars was all meant to be kind of capturing the stories of those that paved the way in our industry. So when you reached out, I was like, we have to get Joan on here. I worked with you 20 years ago, and we'll get into kind of your history in the industry, et cetera. But since then, I mentioned that I was talking to you with my dad. He says hello. Len Kahn, he says hello. So a lot of fond memories there. And this is going to be a good discussion to kind of learn more about how you started out and became an Aggie All-Star.
All right. And those are big shoes for me to step into behind those two big guys.
Well, they'll like to hear that.
Yeah. All true.
Yeah. So, and you have a unique, I think I want to start there. I've been thinking about this because you didn't grow up on a farm. So how do you go from not growing up on a farm to aspiring to get into the ag industry?
Well, to begin with, there was no aspiration because I didn't know anything about agriculture, really. And you're right, I did grow up in Toronto. There was a little bit of influence from my parents' backgrounds. It wasn't traditional farming, but they both came from small fishing villages on the Bay of Fundy in Nova Scotia. And they were involved with lumber and blueberries. So over a period of time, and again, this is many years ago, my father decided that in order to make a good life for his family, he should get out of Nova Scotia. So they forged up into the Ontario and Toronto area. So I was born in Toronto. My sister was born in Nova Scotia, and there was a lot of going back and forth. So that's the extent of my sort of farming experience. So the complete antithesis of that is that there was a brand new high school that was opening up in Thornhill, where we were living in the late 60s. And in 1968, this school was opened as the first experimental high school in Ontario. And possibly that's across Canada. I don't know.
Right.
So behind that strategy was that they encouraged self-learning. And as well, they encouraged students to be very casual, calling their teachers by their first name. It was pretty groovy.
So was it maybe what would we call that, a Montessori school today? Or was it maybe No,
and in fact, it's gone back to very traditional teaching because that concept just wasn't working that well. Maybe they looked at my report cards and said, oh, God, we've got to go back to traditional teaching because the person just doesn't get it.
Right.
So what you do when you go into that school at that time, you were allowed to choose your courses and subjects. Well, immediately I dropped everything science or math related. I took theater arts, I took music, I took English, anything that was kind of would let me have an easy way and fun high school experience, which I certainly did. So by the end of high school, I was really flailing around, and I honestly, I didn't know what I was going to do because the options were fairly limited. I mean, I was not an academic. I faced that, and I know that about myself.
Yeah.
So there was a gentleman from Ridgetown College who traveled around the province and went to high schools to encourage kids to look at Ridgetown. And at that time, of course, it was not part of the University of Guelph. It stood on its own feet, but supported by the provincial government. I convinced my parents that this would be a good option for me. It was only going to cost for a 2-year program $800 a year. That was including books, meals, residence, and courses. So they, at that time, and that was in the very early 70s, so I went there in 72 and graduated in 74. There were three options of courses. So there was the Ag Production and Management, and then there was Ag Lab Technology, and then there was Ag Secretary. So guess which one I chose? Well, it was just like a no-brainer. I had to take the Ag Secretary program because the Ag Production and Management was really directed at the guys that were coming in off the farm. They were going to have a good time. They were going to learn a few new things, head back to the farm. The Ag Lab Technology, well, there was too much math and science in that. And frankly, I didn't know what I was doing anyway. So I just picked that one and thought, okay, this will be great. So there were 74 graduates in 1974. So we spent 2 years together, the 74 of us. And there were about 58 of the Ag Production Management. Then there were about 10, I think, of the lab tech folks. And then all female, 6 of us in the Ag Secretarial program. So I head first into that program. And honestly, I really struggled at first because they were introducing science and math and plant pathology. And this had nothing to do with being an agricultural secretary, but you had to get through that first couple of the first and second semesters in order to move on into the core of what that program was really actually about.
You were likely in there with Aggies, right? Like they probably they were from the farm, so maybe they had a base at least, right? So yeah.
They did. I think the light bulb went on after I struggled through those first couple of semesters and got into this bookkeeping and business math. And it was almost like an aha moment for me. I mean, I was terrible at math in any level of school, but business math struck me. And as it applied to agriculture, the light bulb was coming on. So over that 2-year period, God, we had so much fun there because there were probably 6 or 7 of us that stayed on weekends because most of the students' base would go home. They were working on the farm. They were, they had responsibilities. I didn't have a responsibility. So stayed in the Ridgetown area and learned about countrified living and living in a small town and going to the hotel on Friday and Saturday night with the red terry cloth tablecloths and a 25-cent draft and plain shuffleboard. And they bring in these entertainment from Detroit, like Red Dog and his pups. And so, I mean, we just really had a great time. So I didn't know that I was learning a lot of things about what my future would hold. But I was, and that was a great time to remember a lot of good memories there.
That's where you learned it wasn't where are we going to go tonight. You're going to go to the pub. You're going to go to the pub.
The pub. And the ladies' entrance, by the way.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Forget all that. Yeah.
I'm stepping back in time. I know when we first chatted about a month ago, and then I sat down, I thought, well, I better be a little bit prepared. So I'm going to look at the timeline. Well, I have 4 pages of timeline here, and I'm going, oh my God, I've been knocking around this industry for like 50 years. So it's shocking. And my dear mother just passed away this year. She was 102. And I figure I've got another 30 years in me to make some more moves in the industry. I just don't know what they are right now, but
you absolutely do. You absolutely do. So how do you take that experience at Ridgetown and then and parlay that into, obviously you gave a semblance of that, right? So you started to kind of, it sounds like, get an itch for business ownership. Like, hey, this sounds something interesting. You obviously took a liking to the ag industry. So then where did you parlay that into like the next portion of your career?
Yeah, that was a difficult time because you end up you finish 2 years and you're getting close to the end of the second year, and what are you going to do? I mean, every student struggles with that.
Yeah,
certainly not alone in that regard. But I do remember, and it was a very formal college experience. We had to dress up in the evenings to go to a dinner in Wilson Hall, and you had to wear a skirt, and the guys had to wear a jacket and a tie, and it was pretty formal. And at the top of the stairs in Wilson Hall, there was a job board, and it was split in half. So on the right side were jobs coming available for boys, and that left side were jobs available for girls. There were 3 on the girls' side, and on the right side, it was completely full.
Yeah.
I couldn't find, because a lot of these guys, really, they were going back to the farm.
Right.
They weren't going to go and work for the crop protection industry or farm equipment dealerships.
Yeah.
So just kind of, again, sometimes it's just things just happen, and I don't know why, but I didn't want to go back to Toronto. What was I going to do there? I mean, I could maybe get a job with the Ministry of Ag and Food, but I just liked it a lot in that whole area around Kent County. So a few of us rented a farmhouse, and then we had to all kind of find work. Yeah. And this job landed on my plate, and it was with CIL. Mm-hmm. And CIL had agri-marts, in all of southwestern Ontario, right into Quebec, down into the Maritimes. I kind of got thrown into a job, a role there, which was in the store office. And I remember being referred to as the girl behind the counter. So,
by the way, there's a book title for you later on in life.
Oh God! I'm going to get you to write it for me. Oh. Awesome, girl.
Oh, there's ChatGPT for that now. You just put in your content, and it can do the rest.
Yeah, you're right. Right. So I was. The offer was $2.25 an hour. Same amount of money that the lady was paid that came in to clean the washrooms at night. What did I know? I didn't know anything. And so I just went in blindly. There were about, let me back up. That Agri-Mart in Thamesville, where I was posted, was the feeder Agri-Mart for all bagged fertilizer in southwestern Ontario for all Agri-Marts, and also including other independent crop input dealerships. Yeah. So that was the gig there, was learning about fertilizer, nutrients, how to put together recommendations for farmers, selling work boots, gloves, then starting to understand a little bit about the chemical industry. Yep. So lots of reps coming in, selling their products directly from the manufacturer, as your dad talked about in that time. And so I was there for about 4 years and kind of moved up the ladder a little bit within the CIL Agri-Mart business, far enough to be transferred to the Agri-Mart in Norwich, Ontario. Mm-hmm. That I was supposed to be managing. Well, that fell on its face as soon as I got there. I just was not accepted in that small business, and it was really, I will say, it was because I was a woman and I didn't come from the area, and I really struggled with it. So I had a lot of friends and I'd made a lot of friends at King Grain in Pancor, and so one day I just picked up the phone and I called Paul King, who was the CEO, and I think I was crying. And he said, just come back here, move to Chatham, and we'll figure something out.
Yep.
Oh, okay, this is awesome. So as you know, and probably everyone else that watches this knows, King Grain was a multifaceted agricultural company with lots of different arms and legs to it. Specifically, when Nat, Paul's father, started the company, his love was hybrid seed research. They had a milling division. They had a very large farm service center on the property in Pancor that serviced all the farming community in that area. That was led by Carl Van Hove. That certainly, I know you know Carl's name. He's passed now, but I went back to Chatham. Carl said, "Here, I'll just take you under my wing, and let's sit down and we'll just talk about some stuff." And lo and behold, what they were all thinking, led by Paul King, was that they wanted to pursue King Grain as a distributor of chemical products in Ontario. And so I was on that very bottom of that, the entry into that distribution company. We did not really have a plan. Carl was a very outgoing personality. He could talk to people. He was a great networker. So I joined him. We talked to Elanco. We talked to Aggie. We talked to Monsanto. And lo and behold, we were able to, and your dad talked about this quite a bit, that time of the late 70s when the industry really changed towards distribution rather than direct selling by manufacturers. So the whole landscape was changing.
So you were in on all that. That's amazing. Yeah.
I mean, I still have dreams about Lasso on 5-gallon. There's 36 pails of 5-gallon US gallon pails of Lasso on a pallet and 21 skids on a tractor trailer. And so I became a logistics person. Yeah. And I just sort of learned, and we all learned together. And Paul and Carl certainly just had a great forethinking into how that part of the business was going to really make them more profitable and more rounded in the ag industry. There are a lot, as you know, of really smart, successful young people that came out of that organization, like Dave Bowdy, Dale Petrie, Brenda Trask, Grant Craven still is part of the Pride division at that location in Pancor. And these people were all like young upstarts that we were allowed to fall down, stand up, wipe ourselves off. And Paul was just a fantastic leader.
Well, it sounds like he's, they write a lot of books now on all these types of traits that come from good leaders. And that was not necessarily something that was commonplace back then, right? Yeah. Let people fall down, let people fail, hire just, good, smart people with good work ethic and take it from there. And so it sounds like you got to the right person at the right time, for sure.
And we had a lot of fun doing it as well. Yeah. Great, really a lot of fun. Learning along the way.
Awesome. Now, how did you then go from all of that success? Where did you go from there? I'm curious on how did Joan become one? So now obviously you've got this passion for agriculture. You're learning the business in a great time, right? Because you're learning things that no one else is learning because of your unique business setup at King. So then how did you parlay that into going out on your own?
Well, so there's a lot behind that, and I won't go into a ton of detail, but over time, that ag distribution business was sold to Van Waters and Rogers.
Yep.
So I became part of that group. The office was located in London, Ontario. By that time, I had married, and we were living in Baden, just outside of Quebec. So, I don't think I was really enjoying that new venture with Van Waters too much. Yeah. We had decided to start a family. So once our daughter was born, I kind of went, you know what, I think I just need a little bit of a break here. Like, I just don't really want to do this. Sometimes you just have to,
Yep.
you know, and hopefully you're going to come up for air at some point. So I took that opportunity to just have a couple of years at home with my daughter, but I still, you know, a lot of the network, a lot of good friendships, all these people that I knew that worked in the ag chemical side of the business, manufacturers, distributors, they were friends, and I kept in touch with them.
Yeah.
I had a little bit of a short-term contract teaching the grower pesticide safety course to Ontario farmers. That was a real eye-opener because most of the courses I was teaching were to Mennonites in the Waterloo and Wellington counties.
Yeah.
Quite an experience. You know, there was a presentation that you had to give, and you had to go through various facets of the safety of usage of pesticides.
Yep.
There was a component on sprayer calibration, and it was a video. And so 9 times out of 10, wherever the location was that I was teaching, usually at a Mennonite community hall, they weren't allowed to watch the video. So I had to sort of spoon feed that part. And lo and behold, learned that it's the farm wife who does all that sprayer calculation, and they weren't there. So these guys had to pass the course to get their certificate. And I just remember being very hands-on through that couple of year period. It was very interesting.
I'm thinking back to your high school where you were like, no math, no science, please. And then you're teaching pesticide courses.
I know.
It's
you know why? Because it just made sense to me.
It just, well, you know, I can't say any of us in high school are doing necessarily what we thought we'd be doing, especially in the early grades of high school. So it just goes to show you things can change for sure.
Oh boy, you just never know. Yeah, you never know. So anyway, I did that for a while, and then I had a call from a good friend of mine at DuPont. 2 people actually, Bill Summers and Carrie Colborn. And what are you doing? And I'm like, well, you know, I don't know. I'm doing, you know, I'm not doing much. Well, we're launching a new corn herbicide. It's called Ultim. And we're going to make an offer to some growers. If they buy 20 acres, we'll give them 5 for free. So would you call this list of 200 growers and promote this? Sure. $25 an hour. So they dropped by my house, laptop, which I didn't know how to operate, spreadsheet, which I didn't know how to operate. And I got on the phone and realized that, wow, these guys, these farmers, they not only are they interested in this promotion, they like talking. And they're giving me a whole lot of information that would be probably quite valuable to DuPont. Yeah. So I started note-taking, and that project went over for them very, very well.
Yeah.
There was one arm of that project, which was they were looking for someone to hire contractors to go out and talk to the growers that use the product after it was used. So a good friend of mine who actually I graduated from Ridgetown with, Brian Bestard, and you know Brian, or did Brian? Yeah. And he had started his own ag placement business in Eastern Canada. Yeah. So they went directly to Brian, and he hired contractors for these on-farm visits. Yeah. So Brian and I had maintained a friendship. And so one day I called him and I just said, you know, like, you're doing that, and I did this project for DuPont. We should maybe, like, what's going on here? You know, like, there's some stuff here that I'm getting the feeling that some of these manufacturers need help. I don't really know what it is, but I think they do. And I think that I'm sensing their back ops groups, they don't have them, or they're struggling, or they don't have enough people. And, you know, at that time, a lot in the late 70s, a lot of them, mid 80s, a lot of those companies were breaking off from their pharmaceutical motherships. Yep. And so they had all this extra help, but then all of a sudden they didn't have it anymore.
Right.
So Brian drove in from St. Mary's, and we made a few phone calls to people we knew, Sandoz, Ciba, DuPont, and set up appointments for 3 visits in one day. So this was in 1993. And we jumped in his car and we visited them, and we came out with business, like stuff that we said, oh yeah, we can figure out that, we can do that, but we didn't have any infrastructure. But people were quite optimistic that we could help them with some back office type of work, like starting to use mailing lists to cleanse and target and promote their products. And so we drove home that day and said, well, we've got a business here. And this all happened in one day. When we call it, oh, well, something ag. So, well, there's going to be telephones involved. So, oh, AgLine sounds good. Stopped at a printer. Can you, create a little, logo? It was not very pretty, but it did the trick. Had phone numbers. And I made an appointment with a paralegal that afternoon. The next day we went in for $200. We incorporated AgLine Communications Limited.
Wow.
I had a bit of an experience also with Wilbur Ellis in between all this Van Waters and grower pesticide safety, et cetera. And when they wound down their business in Canada, their office was in Guelph, which is where I went to work. And when they wound down, they had all this furniture and phones and all this stuff. So does anybody want this? So they had said no. So my husband and I went over, picked it all up, threw it in our basement. So what did we do? We cleared out the living room of our house, set up a table, put a phone on it. I had a Rolodex. And then Brian and I, just by phone and just by setting up meetings, networking, going to CAMA, going to Crop Life, which wasn't called Crop Life then, talking to people. And so then came the time that we had to face that we needed a storefront.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when I met Len Kahn. Someone said, oh, Len Kahn, do you know him? You guys should talk. He's out there. He's digging around for business. And of course, Ray Chick had left Aggie, and he had started Engage Agro and had one product at that time. And so I called Len and I said, Len, you don't know me, but let's sit down. Of course, we were in love right away. Like we just became the best of friends. Yeah. And I said, okay, I'm going to pull the trigger on office space in Cambridge. Are you in? And Len's like, absolutely. And I said to Ray, are you in? Absolutely. So we moved into an office in Cambridge. Was a big center part of the space with 3 or 4 offices surrounding. So we each had an office, and we sit in our offices and wait for our phones to ring. Come out at lunchtime and say, okay, just going to Wendy's, Martin's. And just basically had a good time helping each other launch our various small businesses.